Let me know if you guys can see that okay. I'm seeing some head nods. Awesome. Great. Okay. So essentially, this is something I talked a lot about in that session. So this is, we're calling it the AI Academy. And basically the proposal is it's a 6-session series, and we're offering it on every flex day of our 23-24 calendar year. So we just completed the first 3, and then the second 3 are going to be in the spring. So essentially, we hold it on every flex day. That way we're not having to do like extra PD days. We can kind of guarantee attendance on those days. And if faculty complete all 6 sessions, they get the Moorpark College AI Academy certificate. They can either attend live and get counted that way. That's a way to earn kind of a credit for the certification. Or we're also putting them, the sessions are recorded. So we're putting them in Canvas Studio in a faculty hub that we have. And then if faculty and they watch the whole recording, and then they answer like a couple of knowledge checks about the recording, nothing laborious, just like a couple of questions, they can get credit that way. If they do all 6 sessions, either through attending all of them, doing them all online, or a mix of the two, that is how they will receive the certificate. So that's kind of the overarching structure. The AI Academy sessions are broken down into 2 sections. The first section is Unit 1, and we're calling that AI and Digital Literacy. I'll scroll really quick. So these are the titles and description of each session. So our first one was What Goes In Must Come Out, an Introduction to Generative Pre-Training Transformer Technology and Ethics. This was a lot of fun. We got a lot of feedback on this. So basically, I work very closely with our computer science faculty. Unfortunately, my partner has a master's degree in machine learning. And so through that, we developed a session that basically breaks down AI transformation technology into its basic components in a way that a layperson could understand. And kind of like provides a space for faculty to ask questions after the session. So we really just talk about like the basics of large language model technology and how it works, so that we feel like we can give people kind of a starting point. Because something our faculty were really talking to us about is that they just didn't feel like they had a foot in the conversation, a foot in the door, because they felt kind of like technically illiterate, and they didn't know how to like what to ask or who to ask. So this was a really fun session, and we actually got really, really great feedback on it. And then the next one is AI and Ethics, a deeper dive. So this is where we actually talk specifically about some of the background historically and culturally around AI, like what are the demographics of AI researchers? Who decides what type of data is used in large language models to train them? Some of you may be aware, but I say this like fact all the time because it elicits quite a reaction, is that, so ChatGPT-3, the GPT that OpenAI released in November of 2022 and made a big splash, 22% of the training data for that model came from Reddit. And I feel we just feel that that's something people should know about. That's a pretty, that's a large chunk of data coming from essentially an internet forum site. So just kind of giving them some context, like who's deciding what goes into these algorithms, who's deciding the data that goes into them, and why is that of a concern to us as educators? The third session in AI and digital literacy is something we call process versus product. And this is the kind of the heart about a lot of our trainings are centered around using AI to help students engage in the process of online assessment. So the description for this is US education has an alignment problem, the focus on product versus process in assessments, particularly in online classrooms. This presentation defines the process versus product dichotomy and demonstrates how AI can be a powerful tool in teaching students about and engaging them in the learning process. So we talk a lot about how in this process versus product framework, you can leverage AI in any classroom, and it ties it specifically to teaching students how to think about their thinking and learn about their learning. So it's kind of a way to use AI to Trojan horse in just some good pedagogy practice in an online or face-to-face classroom. This is probably, of all of them, the one that has made the biggest splash at our campus and in the district. People have really been blown away by that one. They really appreciate kind of contextualizing not just AI, but AI in the higher education space, because that's what concerns us, right? Unit 2, AI in higher ed. So these are proposed sessions. They're going to start in January and end, I think, in March 7th. So the first one here is learning the language, how to author AI prompts that generate desired results. That's taking place on January 5th. Then we've got building authentic assessments with AI that builds on the process versus product session. And then the last one is looking forward, the evolving landscape of AI in higher education. So we decided to end this with a panel, basically because we want faculty to get involved. We want them to be excited and not nervous, because we know that that's what's going to generate conversation. So this last one is going to be a panel. We already had a ton of faculty sign up. We're really excited about the turnout for this one. So that is a very brief overview of this AI Academy, the thinking behind it, titles and descriptions of sessions. That's pretty much my shtick, and I'm sticking to it. I can offer a lot more context, or I can just answer questions, whatever you folks are most comfortable with. Oh, and one thing I will add. So I'm faculty facing. Obviously, I work directly with faculty. That's my role. But we opened the sessions up for students, and several students from our associated student government came to the sessions. And one of them was really, really thought we should be doing something like this for students, which I actually really agree. I feel that direct AI instruction for our students could be really helpful, particularly because I think this cloak and dagger mentality that a lot of schools have, it's like, do we tell them about it? Do we articulate it? Like what's the answer? We're afraid that they're using it to cheat. Maybe if we don't talk about it, that will help. I'm a big fan of bringing students into the conversation. So anyways, I talked to our associate student government president that was intrigued by this process. And now we're working on a proposal. We have something called President's Leadership Forum, where basically students that apply, they're in the leadership forum, and they can basically propose a project, and then the project that is accepted gets funded, et cetera, et cetera. So this student is going to work on essentially creating a replica of this AI Academy, but for students. And we're talking about how to incentivize that. Like maybe we can make this a non-credit course, or just badge it in a particular way so that students could actually, put it on their resume if they were to take it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm actually super excited about that process. We've started the proposal. We're waiting to hear back. So I can keep you guys posted on the progress of that as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of buy-in from faculty, from classified have attended these sessions, and they really enjoyed it, and students as well. All right, so that was the last little note I wanted to make. Any questions, additional context that would be helpful? Yes, Nikki.
Thanks. Hi. This sounds pretty incredible. Can other faculty gain access to your previous sessions from other colleges?
Absolutely. So I'd be happy to link all of the sessions. We recorded all of them. The process versus product, I also spoke on that at the online teaching conference in June in Long Beach. So I could send you guys that recording as well. Absolutely. Awesome. And then I see Jan.
Hi, Trudi, and thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Really quick question. How did you develop the curriculum? Who built this?
Who built the, okay,
Dan,
so
can you put your question in the chat? I can't hear you.
I think I caught it, Jan. It was who developed the curriculum for this session. Was
Okay.
that correct? Yes. Okay, cool. Great question. So this curriculum, as I said, it was developed primarily by myself, our head librarian, who that's actually another note that anytime I'm asked to speak on this AI Academy, I make a huge note of saying, involve your librarians. They are the OG chat GPT, reference librarians. That's literally what they're trained to do. So this is really the brainchild of, I like kind of am the tip of the arrow, and then I'm working very closely with our head librarian. She's fantastic. Our comp sci department. And then my partner is working as a consultant to verify all the machine learning aspects of this as well. And she actually took it to her graduate advisors, and they lent their thoughts as well. It was really fun. It was kind of a fun, like, collaborative process. We got them in the room, and these are folks with a lot of technical knowledge about machine learning, large language models. We basically came to them and were like, we need a way to develop curriculum that is higher ed focused and for faculty, but that is, obviously factually watertight. We want to really give folks like a usable definition of how these machines work and ethics, et cetera. But we don't want to, we don't want to speak out of turn, and we need technical knowledge. So this has been vetted. by, I think at this point now, about 4 PhDs in machine learning, and they've verified the materials that we use and the analogies that we created, et cetera, in the sessions to verify that, you know, we were giving correct information in just a more digestible, kind of fun podcasty way.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Scott, yes. Hi, Scott.
It's also it's very impressive, and it seems very comprehensive, and I really appreciate that. And when you were talking about Reddit, that's the first time I've heard that, so that's really helpful. One thing that I want to keep thinking about is how do you avoid this kind of policing culture or environment in your classroom where you say, are you using AI? I'm suspecting you're using AI. And I know that sometimes that can happen with plagiarism too, but I feel like that suspicion of students, like I worry about that kind of creating that kind of culture when talking about AI.
Totally. I mean, Scott, that's extremely astute. I mean, it's a huge part of this conversation is, you know, I give this analogy in the process versus product presentation, but there's kind of this pendulum, right? Of like, you know, there's the tech enthusiasts that are like, yes, you know, AI is going to do my job and I'm going to get a paycheck. Fantastic. And they're on one end of the spectrum. And then there's the other end of the spectrum that's, you know, maybe more concerned, like wants to have more of a punitive position on AI use in the classroom. There's some fear about academic integrity, which is completely valid. And then I think there's a lot of folks in the middle who they just don't feel, you know, like equipped to involve themselves in the conversation. But I just wanted to take a moment because I think that it's so easy to kind of glom onto either end of that spectrum and choose that as a direction to move forward. And I completely agree with you that neither of those responses is really, like, I would say, like, not just correct, but like productive. And in the second session, AI and ethics, a deeper dive, we address exactly that. So the first half of the session deals with the larger ethical questions. So, you know, for example, like a lot of we talked about, like, who's training the data? What are their qualifications? What's the demographic of those that are involved in these conversations? Why does that matter? What data is being used, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second half of the conversation, we get into more of the campus level, the boots on the ground perspective of like, okay, you know, we need to have in the back of our head these larger ethical considerations about AI. But as educators, what are our specific ethical, you know, what needs to be our specific ethical approach? So the second part hones in on local ethical questions, AI and academic integrity, and how to have effective conversations about academic honesty in an AI world. And in that section, we address this question of, like, you know, how can we talk about this without creating a punitive culture of like fear and kind of accusation, but also bring students into the conversation of, why is ChatGPT writing your English paper like not it, right? Why is that not the answer? What do you lose when you do that? And what do you lose if you don't understand how ChatGPT works, right? Because it's two sides of the same coin. And then that tees us up for the process versus product conversation, where we get into, we're concerned with the process of learning. We see ChatGPT as being a shortcut to the product. How do we like marry those two concepts? Really, really good question though, because I agree. It has to be approached very, very intentionally and thoughtfully, because we don't want to create a fear culture around this. Absolutely, Scott.
Rudy, Christina has a question in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can read it or you can look at it.
Sure, I'll look at it right now. It says, love the model. How does the training help students produce authentic self-writing? Really good question. And teachers to promote students using AI, but in an ethical way where students grow as writers. I sometimes feel like I'm grading students' ability to use AI, yes, rather than their ability to formulate and execute their own arguments. Really, really good questions. So in the a lot of, as you can probably tell at this point, the process versus product is a real linchpin session in this whole academy. So in process versus product, we spend the entire first half of the session talking about an alignment problem. So it's this nice kind of analogy because in AI and machine learning, this concept of alignment is a real issue. And alignment basically just means human coders have an objective when they create these models. They know what they want from the machine. The trick is, how do they code in such a way that they actually get what they want from the machine? Because as so often happens in these complex algorithms, sometimes the machine will act in unintended ways. Like it's the outcome isn't aligned with what educators wanted. And we feel that in higher education in the US, we also kind of ironically have an alignment problem as well, because our students live in this product-focused world, but we as educators are one of the only spaces that's saying, no, it's actually about the process of learning. To your point, Christina, just kind of like, how do we get students? We don't want to become like prompt generator professors, right? That's not our missive. How do we get them to use it, but really talk about how, well, no, we actually, it's your voice that matters. So we talk about this alignment issue, not only in AI, but in higher education. Our students live in a product-driven world. How do we get them to think about the process? And then the second half of that session focuses on some practical ways in which we can do that. So first it's setting the table, and then we're going to eat, right? So the second half, one of the materials I created and tested on our Associated Student Government for this session is, I call it the AI rubric assignment. So basically I created a rubric. There's 4 criteria. The first 2 have to do with like grammar, syntax, and organization. The second 2 are, I believe, factual correctness and depth of analysis. So in this assignment, which we've tested in our English department, it's gone over quite well. We generate a prompt in AI, or we generate a product, and then we turn the students into the teachers and we have them grade it. So the first 2, it does really well. The second 2, as you can imagine, AI does not do quite as well, or there's like some factual incorrectness sometimes because AI will make stuff up, or perhaps there's a point at which the depth of analysis is not really there because of the way the prompt was worded. We had a student quote from that practice session that we did with Associated Student Government. One of our students said, "It says a lot of nothing really well." And we really honed in on that comment. And we talked about, that's a really interesting point. What do you mean by that? And now we're having this conversation of like, oh, so a successful paper isn't one that has perfect grammar and that looks really pretty and is like 6.5 paragraph. You know what I mean? It has all this structure and is whatever. An effective paper is one that has depth of analysis, that actually has a purpose and a point and a thesis statement. And there's an argument to facilitate. There's a conversation we're having in the paper. So it's not foolproof, but we get into the nitty-gritty of like actually talking to our students about the process of learning and not just the product, because we felt that sometimes that's not something students even think of because they're not taught to kind of think that way anywhere else outside of school. And then we have a couple other assignments as well. So the second half of that session really gets into it. And we talk a lot about how the purpose of using AI in the classroom is not to become AI checkers or like, prompt professors, but to reconnect students. Really, I've been calling it kind of a Trojan horse. Like, can we use AI to reconnect students, not with how to use AI, but to reconnect them to the process of learning, to make the implied explicit? Because often I think that's in any class. And that's the great thing about the use case. That's not just a chemistry class. It's not just an English class. It's any class. It's about the process of learning. And that's, I think, the real disconnect for most of our students. So that's how we've addressed it in this academy. I hope that answered your question. If I need to clarify anything, I totally can do that.
I think everything you said is actually super amazing and super smart, and I'm excited to take it to ASGC. And I'm sorry I can't come on camera and talk to you in person, but I'll be in touch. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Great question, Christina. Honestly, all these questions have been really, really thoughtful. Yes, Scott, I see a hand.
So first of all, I'm grateful that Dr. Fayak brought you here. It's been really helpful just to listen to you, and I hope that you'll come back. One thing that I was thinking about, so my son is in UCLA, and in his different courses, one faculty member will say, we'll have certain ideas of how you can use AI in this course. Like you can use AI to come up with inquiry questions, but you can't use the AI in this place. And then another teacher will have a very different policy. So I'm wondering if at Moorpark, if right now are there different AI policies in different classes? Have you come up with an institutional policy as part of a, whatever the plagiarism statement or something? And if you did come up with something institutionally, how did that happen? Because so many people would have different ideas about AI. So I'm just wondering about that.
That's a really good question. And that's one that we're all really struggling with a lot, to be honest. So in the AI and ethics, a deeper dive session, which is session number 2, when we get into the academic integrity section, we do talk about this concept of policies and, what is the best way to go about legislating this at your institution. So in an odd turn of events, Scott, or maybe not odd, maybe this actually makes sense. We're finding that policy is really lagging behind a lot of this. There's a resistance from the top down to make any like hard and fast statements about it. And I think a lot of that comes from just this conversation is so nebulous and like they don't feel equipped to even have it. So we are currently working, all 3 schools in the district, our VPs and all SITDs are working with them to create an AI policy. So I can give you some information on where we're headed. So basically, we feel that it wouldn't be effective to try to legislate from the top whether or not we are going to allow or not allow AI use in the classroom at the district or campus level. And the reason we're staying away from that currently is because faculty have shared that they feel that could be an infringement on academic freedom. And personally, I do agree with that position. That is something I agree with. And we just want to be careful about legislating that. So first for academic freedom reasons. The second, and this was brought up by another faculty, and I've been saying it ever since I first conceptualized it because it's a really good point. Another ethics issue tied to this is if we refuse to let students use it in a way that we can kind of control the narrative about, or at least not control the narrative, like be a part of the narrative, right? If we can't talk about AI in an open way, in a transparent way, and we just cut it off at the knees and say it's absolutely prohibited at this district and each campus, we're afraid that forces the use underground, right? If it's not allowed, openly, it's just going to go kind of underground, and folks are going to find other ways to use it, et cetera. And then it becomes essentially only a cheating issue. And tied to that ethical consideration as well is, are we disenfranchising students who can't afford AI subscriptions versus the students that can? So if we're not going to put any money behind this, or if we're not going to talk about it, does this mean that our more privileged students are just going to have more resources in which they are still going to be able to use AI, and then our less privileged students are not? So there's lots of like kind of thorny ethical issues tied to this. So the direction we're going right now is to not legislate that it, none at all at the district. So what we're moving towards right now is what we call a like expressly permitted approach. So basically this was something I presented on in that second session, and these are syllabus statements. So we're starting kind of like in the classroom itself and going back up. So Harvard came up with a couple of syllabi statements, and on the left, we've got maximally restrictive, and then these statements become more permissive. So the second one is except where expressly permitted. So basically like you can't use it unless the faculty says you can use it, and then you can. And then the last one is permissive with citations, which is the most permissive version of this. So currently, I think the model we're trending towards is this except where expressly permitted. So basically, except where expressly permitted by the instructor, all work submitted for this course for credit, including exams, papers, and discussion questions, must be completed by you personally. Use of generative artificial intelligence, AI, et cetera, to create new text as part of preparing your work is strictly prohibited. submission or presentation of material created by generative AI, including summarizing, paraphrasing, or editing such material, will be considered a violation of the academic dishonesty policy. So this isn't like what we're set on. This is still a work in progress. I think that the language could be a little more, not if not positive, just less punitive. But the idea here is that we are going to allow it in the classroom, but it's an expressly permitted situation. So if you don't see, if your professor doesn't include something in the assignment that says you're allowed to, or I'd like you to, et cetera, it's not permitted by default unless expressly stated that you can use it. I feel like this is a good middle ground right now. It could change. So we could move towards a more permissive version as time goes on. We could back up and become more restrictive, but we're kind of going the middle route as of right now, because we need to experience it more in the classroom before we feel confident, like legislate more about it. Because it's just, we're kind of in this space, like how do you cite ChatGPT? Honestly, like copyright is still wrestling with that question. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, but the Department of Copyright, the Federal Department of Copyright, put out a call back in the beginning of October, and it literally was asking folks to submit, what do you think? Should AI be copyright or not copyright? Like, what's the deal with copyright? Like, it actually just asked people to like submit their thoughts on this. And I was sending this, and the deadline was like October 31st. And I was sending this to people because I was like, this is like such an incredible example of like kind of the like the entire frame, like mindset the whole country is in at this point about AI. The federal government is just asking people, what do you guys think? Because we don't really know. So yeah, for now, I was kind of a long-winded explanation to your question, Scott, but that's kind of where we're headed right now. Awesome. Sure, of course, Scott.
So really fast.
Can't hear you, Christina. Christina, cannot hear you.
When you say we, is it your college or is it the state?
So, for the syllabi
Like
statement.
something's weird about my phone. Can you see my question in the chat? Can you look at the?
Yeah, I'll check in the chat. Your audio was just off for a little bit, but I think I can hear you now. Let me check in the chat here. Oh, yes, I see it. We're exploring models of DEIA professional learning. Is this the question here, Christina?
No, wait, Trudy, not that one.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's the one about when you say we, are you working with the state? Because I know that we had a super punitive plagiarism policy until the state set guidelines. So do you know if the state, like the CCCO, is developing guidelines under which we are supposed to make ours?
Okay, yes, really good question. So no, this is happening at our district. I have heard like very unverified whisperings that the state is like trying to tackle this issue and provide some guidelines, but I know a couple folks at the state, and what I've heard from them is we don't know what's happening. I don't think people feel confident enough to start like putting stuff in writing and recommending guidelines and policies, because for a lot of folks, this conversation is huge and so nuanced. So we're deciding to move forward in kind of like a vacuum of like we're not getting guidance from the state, so we're moving forward this as a district. But of course, if the state decides to take a stance on this or provides guidelines, obviously we're going to have to fall into step with that. But from what I've heard, there's definitely talk about it. I mean, they're talking about it. It's an ongoing conversation, but we haven't heard anything that represents like actual guidelines yet.
Any other questions for Trudy? Any questions? Okay, I think the question that came earlier, Trudy, is can some of our faculty look at some of the modules that you have? And he said he can share the link with us. Okay, Sharice has a question in the chat.
Yes, let me check.
That was my question too, Sharice. Sharice is our academic senate president.
Oh, okay.
She was at
Oh,
plenary last weekend.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, I see. And then I see something from Scott. Yeah, Scott, absolutely. I can get, I have no problem giving out my contact. And then as far as the modules go, what we've got now is I can share out the modules. I'll probably link the recordings. Because I'm trying to think of how I would share those modules, because obviously we've got a SSO. So I can link I'll fill in the document I showed you guys and I'll link it. So I'll link the titles to the session recordings, and then any materials that were developed along with those sessions, I'll make sure to link those underneath as well, and then keep the description so that you can get kind of an overview. Great, perfect. Yeah, I can do that.
I was thinking, have you opened your sessions to other neighboring colleges, or only restricted to faculty in your district?
Currently, I mean, this has just all happened so fast. I mean, we've since speaking on this a little at OTC when we were developing it, and then at the CIO conference, plenty of folks have asked for this, and I've sent it. Like, and anyone who wants, this is, I come from the open access, open research world. Like, this isn't stealing to me, like this is sharing. So I encourage folks, like, if you guys want to take this and run with it, if you want to do this at your own campus, and reach out to me, I'd be happy to like offer assistance or just like tips or whatever. So basically, Dr. Fayek, a lot of interest has been expressed, but currently this is just a district project, particularly because we launched it so quickly. We had this up and running this year, and I think other districts are now wanting to have something similar and having those conversations. So
how long did it take you to develop the modules roughly?
It took, I mean, really, it's very session based. So I would say the plan itself, once I worked with folks in the field, figuring out what the sessions needed to be about was actually very quick. That took like a week and a half, because it was very much a conversation of like, we need folks to understand the basics of generative AI. We need to talk about the ethics of generative AI. We need to tie it into that higher education specific context. And then we need to hit the high notes in higher ed, which is academic integrity, how to use it in the classroom and how that ties to authentic assessments. And then we're ending with the panel of, providing opportunity for folks to feel like they can enter in the conversation and engage. And I think at this point, we're going to do another AI series after the panel. We're going to do that to recruit interest. So figuring out the modules, titles, descriptions, that was quick. Developing each session, I would say like a couple weeks at least per session, coming up with kind of like, I mean, not really learning outcomes. Yeah, coming up with learning outcomes, developing the material. The process versus product took longer because we had to run tests, do kind of like tiny case studies. So overall, I would say like 3 months total probably to develop it all.
And how much each module, training module? How many hours each?
Oh, it's pure. So in terms of catching up on the sessions, we just ask that they watch the recorded session and do a quick knowledge check. That's essentially it. So folks, I would say that the questions have been robust. So the recording usually is about 45 to 55 minutes of actual like lecture time. And then the question sessions for the live sessions would be like 30 minutes. We don't force the folks watching the recordings to watch all of that. But honestly, if you're doing it in the recorded way, you could get through it in about an hour and 10, probably, maybe hour, honestly, maybe just an hour.
Yeah, Trudy, I just got back from some professional development conference, and they had something like this. They call them communities of practice, and we have something like this for online teacher training. And so what they would do is they would give teachers X number of hours for what you just said, like listening to the information, reading, whatever, and then responding to questions. But then if they choose in their little group to have a week, like an hour a week discussion together, then they get more hours. You know what I mean? So it ended up, and she said about like, whenever they did that, like 3 out of the 4 groups that they got together would really take off, and those people really would connect and keep talking about these things even after it was over, and maybe one group would fall apart. But there was basically a way for people to dive in the way that they were able. And so this is really exciting just to hear about the structure of it, because we want something like this at Gavilan, and we do have it for online training, but we haven't expanded to other things.
No, I think the community.
So anyway, thank you. If you
No, I could absolutely, Christina. That's a great comparison. I mean, our ultimate goal is a community of practice. That is what we are trying to generate. So we're trying to get these folks in the room, and we also were really intentional to offer it on flex sessions so that faculty could just feel like they weren't going out of their way. Like essentially they have to go to every flex day. If they just choose to make one of their sessions every flex day, one of our academy sessions, they get the certificate. Like it's that easy. So we wanted it to be like low buy-in cost, because we're trying to generate conversations. We're really going with a community of practice vibe, because we know that that's how we're actually going to be able to tackle this at a district and campus level. So I totally agree. Like community of practice, that's what we're trying to generate. So that's a good way to think about it.
You can see some of the chat thanking you for outstanding presentation. So thank you so much. Any other question for Trudi? Any other questions? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. So thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear you again. I was very impressed in San Diego, especially when you talked about the ethics component. That was really great. And I shared with my colleague here. So I don't think they believed me, but now they do. That was an outstanding one. So
Well,
thank you so much.
Of course, Dr. Fayek, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to come today. I just, I respect all the work of all California community colleges so much. I love working at one. So you guys are doing God's work. I appreciate your time very, very much. And I hope you have a great holiday break, and you will get that email shortly.
Same to you. Thanks. Thank you, Trudi.
Thank you so much, Trudi.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.